Welcome everyone to MPAC's Learning webinar focusing on the end of year processes. I'm pleased to announce Let's Talk Solutions, our FIMS edition, will be every other month in 2024. So that if you have ideas, please reach out and let us know what you'd like to see on Let's Talk Solutions. A couple of housekeeping notes. We are recording this and you will be able to find a link in our knowledge base. We will send that out after, as well as a copy of this presentation. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please enter it in the Q&A section below on your Zoom screen. And let's look at today's agenda. Robin will be covering a number of year-end processes, including GL and AP and reoccurring tickles. But don't worry about taking notes or screenshots. We are recording this and we will send you that copy of the presentation as well as the PowerPoint presentation. So for everyone's sake, my name is Amy Strom, your Director of Client Success here at Impact. And today you'll be hearing from Robin as she reviews the end of year processing. And we do have Leanne in the wings available for questions. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Robin to get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy.
Yes.
And I just shared my screen, so everyone should be able to see my FIMS.
Well,
okay, good. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining today. We're going to cover some end-of-year considerations. Some of them are financial, some of them are not financial, but they're things that would be helpful for you to think about at the end of the year. So I'm going to start with the general ledger end-of-year closing process. One of the best practices that I recommend is before running your end-of-year closing, if you are going to make any changes, if you think you're going to be making any changes to your general ledger, to do that before running the end of year closing. And I will give you some more details about why I am recommending that as we kind of go through the system. Another thing that I recommend is retiring any funds that you need to retire before running that end of year closing process. And the reason is that when you retire a fund, FIMS marks those general ledger accounts as inactive. So when you run your end of year closing process, as long as they all have a balance of 0, those accounts will not get recreated in your next year. So you don't have to worry about them. They'll stay in the year that the fund was retired. So we do recommend retiring funds and doing any sort of master chart work or general ledger changes that you might want to run before you run the end of year closing. Now, FIMS allows you to keep general ledger open for multiple years at the same time. So, for example, if you need to close the year the first time to create GL accounts so you can actually start processing transactions in your system. So that would be run once. And then if you have to go back and make changes or audit adjustments in the previous year, you're going to run that end of year closing routine again. And all that's going to do is it's not going to recreate GL accounts. It is simply going to roll up the year-end numbers and carry them forward into the next year. So they'll update them. So you always make sure that there's no difference between your ending balances and your beginning balances. Now, what I would like to show you here is if you look at my system, right now my system is setting at 2023. If I change this over here to 2024, you're going to see that I don't have any general ledger accounts in 2024. And typically that will be what your systems will look like unless for some reason the end of year process has been run previously and someone has rolled forward the dates and created GL accounts in those new years. So that is, we are going to actually close 2023 today, and you'll get to see what that looks like. So what happens is another part of closing that end of year closing is it establishes beginning balances in your new fiscal or calendar year, the balance sheet accounts, and it rolls up all revenue and expenses from the previous year and increases or decreases your fund balances, and your fund balances in the new year will be reflective of that information. So at the beginning of the year, your revenue and expense accounts are all going to have beginning balances of 0. You're just going to have balance sheet accounts. All right, I'm going to run this utility so you can see what this looks like. Actually, what I think I will do first is retire a fund so you can see what that looks like. Okay. In the fund module under file maintenance, the second menu item here is called retire a fund. If I click on that, it asks me which fund do I want to retire. So you can either type in the fund ID if you know it, or you can look it up in the lookup button. It's going to put in today's date, but I'm going to change this to December 31st. And I'm going to say, okay. So when you retire a fund, this message is going to pop up and it's telling me exactly what I'm doing in case for some reason I've forgotten. But it's telling me that my ending balance is 0. If you see anything on the screen other than $0, you do not want to retire the fund. You want to fix it, do whatever needs to be done, but you don't actually want to retire. And part of the reason for that is if there's not a 0 balance, those accounts, partial accounts for that fund will be marked inactive, and the ones that don't have a 0 balance will continue to carry forward from year to year. And you're always going to have these kind of strange little stragglers from year to year because they didn't have a 0 balance. So always, if this isn't 0, make sure you figure out what needs to be done to fix it before retiring the fund. Okay, so what this did is it marked 29 general ledger accounts for this fund as inactive. So what's going to happen after I close my 2023 year? We'll go in and look and you'll see that I do not have any GL accounts any longer for GL08 in the 2024 year. All right. So in the general ledger module under file maintenance, there is a utility called end of year closing. And the screen that opens up, it asks you what year you're closing, and it's going to default into the current year that is in my system, and then it defaults into 2024. The from and through fields for the fund, if you are running this for the first time and need to close the year for all of your funds, you're going to leave those blank. There is an advanced fiscal year checkbox right here. So what this will do for you is it's going to literally advance your general ledger calendar to 2024, which in my case is my next year. And it's also going to roll forward the fiscal year fields in the system initial setup. And I'll show you where that is after I run this utility. And then down at the bottom, unless you are changing your fiscal year, you would not check the box for close a year. So those are something you probably wouldn't ever touch unless you actually were changing what your fiscal year is, maybe going fiscal to calendar. And I clicked OK. I said, yes, run my report. So this is actually just going to tell me how many records are created. I have no differences between my debits and credits. However, I do seem to have something going on here with my Bass fund and my Evans fund. So I'm going to just minimize that. But if I go back to general ledger now and I switch to 2024, you're going to see that I now have general ledger accounts for 2024. And if I try to find this GL08 fund that I just retired in 23, it's going to come up, there's nothing here. So all of those GL accounts were marked as inactive. And I'm just going to go back here and show you what that looks like. All right, so under the little account tab here, under the account super tab, there's a checkbox that says inactive. This was marked automatically when I retired that fund. So that means it's telling the system, do not create those GL accounts in my next year, which it did what it was supposed to do. Now, if I go into file maintenance and look at my GL calendar maintenance, you're going to see that my GL calendar still says 2023. That's because I didn't check that box that says advanced fiscal year. And the other place that this would be visible is under System Utilities, System Initial Setup, under Posting. My fiscal year still says I'm in 2023. The ramifications of what you're seeing here means that if I was to try to run a financial report, for example, a trial balance, what defaults into this fiscal year field is 2023. This does not prevent you from entering transactions in either year, 23 or 24. But the kind of annoying thing is whenever you go to run a report, it's going to default into the previous year, which is 2023. If I run this again and I check the box, what it's going to do for me is it's going to advance my general ledger calendar to 2024. And it's also going to update my fiscal year field in the system initial setup. So now if I go to run a report, for example, trial balance, it defaults into 2024. So there's really no right or wrong with this. It's just a matter of, do you want, when you're running reports, do you want to have to go in and change the fiscal year, or are you still running most of your reports in the previous year? So it's just a personal choice, but there is no right or wrong here. Okay, once you have closed the year, if you go back in 2023 and make entries, you need to remember to run that end of year closing utility again so that FIMS can roll up and consolidate those numbers and give you new beginning balances. If you don't, you are going to find that you've got a discrepancy or a difference between the year end 23 and the beginning 24. One thing you can do to make that a little bit easier so that you don't have to remember to run that every time you post entries is under Tools, System Utilities, System Options. In General Ledger, the very first option says Automatic End of Year Processing. Essentially what this does is if I was to go back and post something in 2023 at this point, FIMS is going to automatically, as soon as I post that, it's automatically going to kick off that end of year processing for those funds that were impacted and roll that information forward. So I don't ever have to worry about missing something from the previous year. Okay, so now if I look at my GL calendar, you will see that I am in my 2024 year. All right. Bear with me for 1 second. Okay, so the other topic I want to talk about is closing modules by date. So this end of year closing can be run as many times as you need to. But after running that, I can go back to a previous year and post an entry. So I could do a gift adjustment or a grant adjustment in 2023. But let's say, for example, you've been audited, you're adjusting entries in, and you do not want anybody posting anything into a previous year. There is this utility called Close Modules by Date. And there's 3 options here. So close General Ledger, close gifts and pledge posting to GL, and close grants and accounts payable posting to General Ledger. So you can put a date in here. Now, if I was to put 12/31/23 and run this, if somebody tried to post something in General Ledger for 23, it would tell me it's closed, that I cannot post anything back there. But the really cool thing is if for some reason after you've run this utility, you realize there is something that has to be posted back there, all you have to do is come in here and put in an earlier date. So maybe you need to post something in December. You could come back and say that the closing date is 11/30/2023. That would open up that 12th month and allow you to post back there. So close modules by date is a good tool, especially after audit adjustments and things. But it still doesn't prevent you if you really do have to go back there for some reason and post. Another thing that you need to think about is once you've run your year-end processing, if you are running asset rebalancing, before you can run asset rebalancing in your new fiscal year, you need to roll forward your targets. So for example, if I look at my funds in general ledger under the asset rebalancing tab, I have asset strategy codes assigned to my funds. I need to roll those forward in order to be able to run asset rebalancing. And to do that, you're going to say copy prior year targets. And in my case, it would be 2023, and I would copy those forward to 2024. So if for some reason you've closed your year, you're using asset rebalancing and you try to run it and there's nothing on the page, it could be because you just need to copy the targets forward. I'm going to go to accounts payable for this next item here. So there is a utility called Clear 1099 Adjustment Amounts. So for any of you that are printing 1099s out of FIMS and have needed to use that 1099 adjustment field, I'm going to go here. So if you look, there's a 1099 adjustment field. Essentially, that could be used for vouchers transactions that had been posted before this vendor was marked as a 1099 vendor. So you could come back in here and put in whatever amount needed to be added, and then any transactions that you posted after that would get added as well. So if you're using this field, you're going to want to clear that out after, and that's what this clear 1099 adjustment amounts does. So my 1099 adjustment, I say okay. It's going to give me a list of the 3 that it's going to clear out, and I'll just click on this menu item that says clear values, and those are now gone. So they served their purpose. I was able to print the 1099s, and now they've been cleared out, and I have a new year going forward with a $0 amount. All right. Another utility that's in accounts payable is called Update Future Years Accounts. So essentially what this tool is, some folks have wanted to be able to track what is actually due for grants payable in future years. So you can set up your system. Let's say you had a grant that was a 3-year grant. It gets all expensed in the year that it was approved. But the grants payable, the only thing that's going to show up in grants payable in the current year is the payments that have a due date in the current year. Any payments that have a due date in a future year are going to go out into a separate future year grants payable account. So it's easy to see what's actually due this year and what's due in future years. So if you have this set up in your system, what you're going to have to do is at the beginning of each new year, you're going to have to come back in here and bring in whatever was considered future years into the current year so that the payments are paid. Now, the first time that you run this utility, what it's going to do is it's going to separate all these grants payments and take out the future years and put them into future year grants payable. So you have to run it once to get that set up so everything will work. But after that, each year you'll use it to bring in anything that was considered current. Now, there's a couple things you're going to need to think about. You're going to need to have the GL account for grants payable future years. And you're also going to have to make sure that that is set up in your fund class defaults. So if I go down to my funds under file maintenance and go down to fund code maintenance, fund class, if I look at my endowed funds, I'm going to be able to see that grants payable future years right here is 21100 instead of 21000. So I have two grant payable accounts in my general ledger. And let me just show you what that looks like from a report perspective. So if I run a consolidated trial balance, you're going to be able to see here that I have my two accounts. Grants payable current year is 150,000. Grants payable future years is 19,000. So what I need to do at this point is, because I've just closed my year, I'm going to need to run this utility to bring in anything that was payments in 2024 into the current year. So I'm going to say update future years accounts, and my future year is going to start in 25 because 2024 is my current year. And then this is going to give me a list, and it's showing me what it's doing. So it's literally going to be debiting grants payable future years and crediting grants payable because it's bringing it into my current year. So I would just go ahead and post this information, and it's going to create my entries for me with a date here. And we'll edit and post. So now I have everything in the current year that needs to be paid. So if this is something that you're using, you're going to want to remember to make sure and do this. Okay, some other things you might think about at the end of the year, you might want to run some different reports. Reconciliation type reports, things that might be helpful when the auditors start asking questions. And I'm going to go to General Ledger for this first one. And this first report is called Reconcile Subsidiary Modules with General Ledger. What this does is this actually compares your outer modules, gifts, grants, accounts payable, to transactions that have been booked in the general ledger. It's really important that your outer modules are in sync with general ledger, especially from a gift and grant perspective, because if you are doing fund statements and you're displaying the gift and grant detail sections, your summary section on your fund statements pulling from general ledger, and your gift and grant detail sections are pulling from the gift and grant modules. So if somebody has looked at a gift or looked at a grant and said, oh, I need to fix it, and went into general ledger and made a journal entry, you're not going to be in sync with the outer module, and your fund statements are going to be incorrect. So this is a great tool to be able to do that. I actually recommend running this more often than just once a year, usually once a month, because it's easier to remember if there's something strange that happened in the last 30 days versus the last 365. So the first time you come into this, there's going to be no GL accounts in here. So you'll have to populate the GL accounts based on what you're using in your system. For contribution accounts, what are your grant expense accounts, grants payable, admin payable, and you can tell the system which sections you actually want to see by checking the box here. The little boxes, there's 4 of them. So I'm going to run this. And okay, so I have 3 issues in my system, which I need to look at. And if we look at this report, basically each 3 columns is talking about a separate section. So the first 3 columns are talking about the gift module and general ledger. So I have no variances from that perspective. It looks like all of my variances, they're not in the grants expense or the grants module. My variances are all on the grants payable side. So in accounts payable, I have issues I need to find. So what you should see when you run this report is absolutely nothing. There should be no funds listed here at all. So this is a good report to straighten that out if there's any issues. Another great report is in accounts payable, and it is called accounts payables as of a past date. And essentially what this does is, for example, it allows you to see exactly what was open for vouchers on a specific date, even if those vouchers since that date have been paid. So for example, I could choose, and you can filter based on admin vouchers, grant vouchers, scholarship grants, non-scholarship grants, however you would like to see this. I'm just going to pull in my admin vouchers and I want to see it in a detail. So this gives me a list of, let me just drag this down here. This gives me a list of all of the vouchers that were open as of 12/31. And technically this number, this bottom number here should tie back to my accounts payable and general ledger. So this is a report that I can use to make sure that general ledger is in sync with what's in accounts payable. The next one is in the facts module. So in the facts module, there is a report called Facts General Ledger Comparison Report. So the way that Facts gets its information that it uses for you to be able to reconcile is journal entries that impact those investment accounts are sent over to Facts. Now, in the Facts module, you do have the ability to add transactions or delete transactions. And what can happen then is Facts gets out of sync with General Ledger. So Facts is allocating incorrect values because General Ledger thinks the fund has one value, Facts thinks it has another. So this report allows you to see and make sure that your funds are in sync with all transactions and Facts to what's in General Ledger. And I'm just going to run this because it's going to show me all my pools. And awesome. So I guess I have been diligent about making sure my data is correct. This is what you want to see. So my equity pool, there are no out of balance funds. None of my pools have any out of balance funds. So this is actually what you do want to see. I know everything is allocating correctly and there's no variances. And this one's probably another good one to run more often than once a year as well, just to make sure everything is in sync. All right, the next one is called Outstanding Grants by Fund, and that's in accounts payable. Outstanding grants by fund. So what this allows you to do is, let me see here, column 23. Let me just change make sure everything's all set. I'm going to run my report. Okay. So outstanding grants by funds. So this right here, this first column, commitments outstanding as of 1/1/24. This should actually, the total of this should match my grants payable in general ledger. This new one, actually, I'm going to rerun this because I don't have anything yet in 23. Okay. Commitments outstanding as of January 1st, 23. That should match your beginning grants payable balance. And then the fourth column is called commitments outstanding as of 12/31. That total should match your ending balance, grants payable in 2023. Those should tie. Now, new grants approved, that would be anything that would get expensed. So if you looked at your grant expense account for this year, that should be the same number as the totals at the bottom of the page. And I was busy last year. Let's see. So total foundation grants. So these bottom totals should tie back to those numbers in GL. And the third column here is all payments that have been made on those grants in 2023. So that's another good one when you're trying to make sure everything reconciles, or if the auditor comes back and asks a question, this is a good one to be able to see what might be the issue. For any of you that have the pledge module, there is also a report in pledges for age trial balance with an as of date. So that's another one that you can use. It's similar to the accounts payable one, only it's for any pledges. So that's another one that you can use. The other thing you're going to want to think about from a grant number perspective, let me just go to grants. So in my system, all my grants, the first four numbers of the grant number start with the year that the grant was expensed. So if you notice here under applications, 2023, 0006 or 0007. So because I'm using those first four numbers to signify which year the grant was expensed, I'm going to want to go in now and change that. So to get to that utility, I'm going to go to Tools, System Utilities, and Set Automatic Numbers. So on the left-hand side under Automatic Numbers, the very first one is grant number. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change the next grant number, 2024 0001, and save it. So the next grant that I create in my system for 24 is going to have that first number, and then it will just continue to go on. Since we're talking about grants, there's a couple other utilities from a grant perspective. So in the grants module, there's one called Auto Create Grant Applications. So maybe there's some grant applications, designated type grants or things that are paid every year. And instead of having to manually create them again in the year, you can actually use FIMS to auto create them. The only thing that you do have to do is make sure that there is something, whether it's a project code or some common code that we can use to filter the transactions or the grants that we're going to want to recreate. So in my case, I have a project code. So I'm going to go down to project code. And my project code is NC-D right here. And when I run my report, this is going to give me a list of all of the transactions that have that. Now, I would also want to filter this clearly by grant date because it's pulled in everything, but I wasn't sure what I had. And then at the very top, you have the ability, the little menu item that says create applications. So when you click on that, you get a screen where you have to just kind of look at each one of them separately and make the decision about what needs to be done. Like a lot of these things just say increase the date by 12 months because you're recreating them in the new year, and then some choices about coding. And then you also have the ability to make choices that have to do with contact information. The default ones that populate are contact name and address from profile. This is the default simply because if an address has changed over the past year, it's going to be changed in the profile, not in an application, a historic application. So it's always best to pull from the profile. And then when you click the create button, it will create all those applications for you. Now, there's another way to auto create designated grant applications as well, and that's by using the distributions tab in the fund module. So I'm going to go to funds and I'm going to run this report first just because. Okay. Under the grants, again, file maintenance, the second item is called recurring grants from fund distributions. So I'm going to just run this and then I'll come back and explain what I did. Okay, so if you look here, this is giving me a list of recurring grants that I should be creating. They have a next action date, and some of them might be based on a percentage of the available to spend dollars, or they could be based on a very specific dollar amount. So let me just minimize this or close this. Let's see. Okay. In the John Adams Fund, if you look at my distributions tab, there is the very first one for $250. That's saying that this is a $250. It's based on amount versus a percentage and what my next action date is. There's even a designated payee in here as well. And then this one is also, to the Krista McCall of Planetarium, is also a specific dollar amount. So that utility is pulling the information from this distribution tab. So if you have grants that are made year after year, or donor advised funds, the donor makes the same ones year after year. It's just based on that amount might change, but that utility allows you to create those. So what it's saying here down at the bottom, you can actually filter by funds, fund ID, division, class, type, or subtype, and it can be based on the available to spend calculation, or it can be based on a single balance. So by default, it goes to the available to spend calculation, but you could also say, I want this based on whatever is in my Fund 3 balance, which is typically your available to grant. And then when it runs the report, you can just create the unposted grant applications. So it's not going to create and post it. So you do get the ability to go into the application and make changes or update or add additional information before actually posting those through to accounts payable. All right, the last thing that I want to show you is in the profile module, and it's called Advanced Contact Dates. So let's say that you have a recurring tickle in essentially what a tickle is in FIMS, it's a reminder. So if you have reminders out here that you need to advance, it's something you do on an annual basis. I'll show you what I did as a sample. So under my contacts, I'm hitting my contacts. This is the contact module, and I actually have a view called donor birthday card reminders. So essentially, this is a data grid view of reminders to myself when to send these donors' birthday cards. And I sorted them by date. So if you look here, these dates have all been forwarded to 2024. In order to advance those contact dates, you're going to go to advanced contact dates. And just a reminder, because I did this myself a few times, each time you do this, it's just going to keep advancing them a year. It advances them a full 12 months. So this is also something you might want to think about doing if you're using contacts and reminders on an annual basis. And that is everything I have for end of year procedures. Do we have any questions that need answering, or?
We do not have any open right now.
Okay.
Let's see if I can get back. But if you do, see, is it sharing? It should be sharing now. Can you see my screen? No,
Okay.
Not yet,
not
actually.
yet. Here we go. Sorry, it was just taking a little while to come up. There are no outstanding questions right now, but if you do come up with a question, please feel free to reach out. Our contact information is on the screen and we can get those questions answered. Remember, we do have this is set to record, and we will be sending that out as well, provide that link to our knowledge base where all of our webinars are. We are moving our Let's Talk Solutions to every other month in 2024. This change is really being implemented to ensure that each session is packed with the best resources and topics possible, allowing us to provide even greater value. We do recognize your time is valuable, so we believe that this new schedule will really enable you to make the most of each session and also freeing up some of your time. As always, if you have ideas and thoughts that you want to see in a Let's Talk Solutions, reach out and let us know, and we'll be sure to get them in front of Robin and Leanne.
Rob, Amy, we do have one question if we can read it out. Sarah would like to know if there's a way to print the Form 1096 after 1099s are printed.
Remind me what the 1096 is, please. Is that the summary?
Yes.
Yes, that's the summary page. I'm not sure, Sarah. I will double check. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. Sorry, but I'll get back to you. I'll let you know.
Great. You'll connect with her directly, Robin?
Yes. Yep.
Fabulous. Great. All right. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Please feel free to reach out if you need assistance or have additional questions for year-end processing. Enjoy the rest of your week, all.
Thanks, everybody.